Hi, welcome to Game Talk, the show where we talk about games. I'm Max.
And I'm Kaila.
And today we're going to be talking about Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft.
This is Wizard of the Coast new addition to Dungeons & Dragons. It basically expands the world of Ravenloft with some new character features, new monsters, different domains, all kinds of neat, juicy things in here.
So, that's okay. If you're in a hurry, the quick version of this review is we love the book.
Yes.
It's really great. We're both big horror movie and horror story fans, and we're both big D&D fans, and this is just such a nice marriage between those two things.
Mm-hmm. It adds a lot to your D&D experience, especially if, in my opinion, you're playing Curse of Strahd already. This adds so much more to it, but you can use this kind of information in pretty much any D&D campaign because of the fact that you can basically go into different domains. So it's one of those situations where you go to sleep and poof, you wake up and you're there.
Yeah, I really like this one. It's so for those of you that don't know, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft is what's called. There's different kinds of D&D books, and this one is what's called a campaign setting guide, or a what's the wording they use? A campaign source book. And so each of these campaign source books has information. It's like an encyclopedia for that specific world. And so this is the encyclopedia for the world of Ravenloft, which is different from all the other worlds because instead of just one planet, it's all these different dimensions. And some of them are tiny and some of them are huge, but each one is horrifying. And each one represents kind of a different like horror movie trope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are quite a few different kinds. Some of my favorites would probably be the body horror, the psychological horror, the folk horror. Gothic horror is always fun, dark fantasy. There are so many different kinds, and you can add what you want from each one. You can, they give you little hints on how to portray them, how to narrate them.
Yeah. And I think it's really cool. They included the basics of, like Kaila said, a ton of different genres of horror, including, they even went so far as to add in slasher horror, which is really cool because that's the last kind of horror I would think about implementing in a D&D game. But that's the kind of thing that I want to read in a book that I'm paying for, is something that I didn't already think of. And it gives you some interesting ideas on how to implement something fast-paced and life is cheap, bloody like slasher horror into a dice-rolling, number-crunching game like Dungeons & Dragons, and it seems really neat. Mm-hmm. And it's something I actually kind of want to try now.
Yeah, just throw a hillbilly in there with a chainsaw.
Yeah. Well, first he'd have to invent the chainsaw. Or maybe he comes from one of the domains of dread where the chainsaw exists. Yeah. The other cool thing about it being all these different mini dimensions instead of one big dimension is that there's different technology levels in each one. Mm-hmm. So, the one where the bad guys are mummies and the evil god pharaoh, has an ancient Egyptian level of technology, so it's really low tech. But the one where the bad guy is basically the D&D version of Dr. Frankenstein, they have to have stuff like electricity for that to work. So it's really cool because each domain is tailored to the kind of scares you want to give your players. Mm-hmm. And the thing with these campaign source books, a lot of them, your whole campaign is supposed to be set in that setting. And so there's not really any reason for, like, I run a campaign in a homebrew world. Kaila's running a Curse of Strahd campaign, so that's all contained in Barovia, which is in this book, but it's also in the Curse of Strahd adventure book that she has. So I don't need the Theros source book. We don't need the Forgotten Realms source book because we're not running in those settings. The cool thing about Barovia is that, like Kaila said, you can just come and go. Or not Barovia, Ravenloft. The cool thing about Ravenloft is that, like Kaila said, you can just come and go. None of these domains are attached to each other physically. So there's all this interdimensional travel kind of BS going on. Mm-hmm. And so you can very easily be in your homebrew world and then have some quest take you through the mists into Barovia or Borca or Lamortia, and then back to the homebrew world. So it's the first campaign source book that I've actually bought, and it's the first one that I think I'll be able to use in my existing campaign. And I think with Kaila running Curse of Strahd, which takes place in Ravenloft, this is going to build on her campaign a lot.
Oh yeah, I already have so many ideas just by reading this. I'll be honest, I didn't get to read the entire thing, but what I did read, I really liked. They add new racial features, they add new character classes, they add new subclasses for like the Bard and the Warlock. Specifically, of course, because I love Warlocks, my favorite would be the Undead character subclass, Warlock subclass. It basically kind of turns you into undead without being rotting flesh, which is kind of cool.
Although if you do want to be rotting flesh, they have new races too, one of which is the Reborn, which is sort of like a Frankenstein's monster kind of deal. So you can die and then come back to life as a Reborn, and you can choose whether you're either a construct like Frankenstein's monster or an undead like a zombie, but a smart zombie, like a revenant.
Hex Bugs are pretty cool too.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about the Hex Blood.
Yeah, they're probably one of my favorites because you're a Fae now. You either were always a Fae or you've become a Fae by the intervention of hags or some other magical source, usually hags. Like for example, one of the options it gives you in the book is your parents went to a hag for help in conceiving a child, and therefore you were born, but you are not exactly human because everything that comes from a hag comes with a twist, which I think is a really neat way to play that off in a character of some sort.
And here at Game Talk, you should know we love us some hags.
Oh, yeah.
So we use hags all the time in both of our games, and actually her character in the game that I DM has made some pretty dicey deals with a hag, and so now that this Hexblood thing exists, I don't know, she might have to watch out because that might be looming on her horizon if she's not careful.
I'm down for that. I'm totally down for that. I love what I got from the hag. It's my favorite gift ever.
Also, so this book has a bunch of different sections. It's got character options, so it's got races and subclasses. It has information on the different kinds of horror and suggestions for how Dungeon Masters should run those kinds of horror. It's got suggestions for players on how to create a character that has flaws and attributes that fit with a horror campaign. Then it's got a whole section that's just information on all these. There's like 32 different, they call them domains of dread. 32 different domains in Ravenloft. And then in the back, it's all new, scary kind of monsters.
Yes.
And scary versions of classic monsters that we've already got. And it even has some advice on how to take monsters that they haven't made a scary version of and just make them scary when you put them in your horror game. So if horror is something that you like, and horror is something that you want to inject into your D&D campaign, or maybe it's already in your D&D campaign and you want to intensify it, this is a great book to do that with.
Yes, I definitely agree on that.
If horror is not something that you like and you want to lean more into the high fantasy, like, you want to be less like Bloodborne and more like She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, this book's probably not worth the money because you're not going to get a whole lot out of it.
Yeah, it definitely focuses on the horror aspects of D&D that a lot of other books, like even the regular Curse of Strahd campaign, is almost bland when you read it, just because it puts just the framework there, and then you kind of have to flesh it out a lot more. You have the liberty to do that and make all these great changes and stuff, but for people who are having a hard time coming up with that kind of feel and how to narrate it, or how to alter the enemies and stuff, or even just the surroundings, this is definitely a perfect way to help. Yeah,
the Curse of Strahd book kind of pulls its punches. Van Richten's does not pull its punches, man. It's horrifying at times. Well, I mean, I guess it's supposed to be horrifying throughout, but when you're a diehard horror fan like us and you're kind of jaded, but even some parts of this, I was still like, ooh.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I think even the book in some places, multiple times it references to make sure things are okay with your players.
Yeah.
Before you just dive into the creepy, nasty, gritty bits of it.
Which is another thing I really like, actually. I've been, so I'm one of those nerds that reads about this stuff online too, you know, and a lot of the discussion is kind of divided. Some people are, you know, the kind of people I'm talking about, right? Some people are mad about this book before it even came out because of all the wokeness in it, you know? And it's like too woke. It's like a SJW book or whatever, which it's like, come on, we're playing a game. Can we not politicize it? But I actually really like that because it makes it more accessible and more accepting. And like, we're nerds, man. We all have struggled with not being accepted. And I think it's really cool that I think a nerdy community should be like the most accepting place you can find. Mm-hmm. And so I like that they put some wokeness in this book.
Yeah, and then there's always the option of not buying it.
Yeah, or it's D&D, so if you don't like the woke stuff they put in, just have your campaign not be woke, I guess.
And you can definitely change things that are in the book as well.
Yeah.
Something you don't like, whether it's because of personal preference or because you think you have a better idea, you as a DM, or even as players, as long as you talk with your DM, have the liberty to make those changes, so.
Yeah. But one of the examples of wokeness that I really like and what got me off on this tangent was, yeah, a bunch of different places it says like sit down with your players beforehand and talk about what is gonna scare them in a way they're gonna enjoy and what's gonna scare them in a way they're not gonna enjoy. Mm-hmm. Which is great because that's kind of something that good DMs have been doing for a long time, but it's something that you've kind of had to figure out to do. D&D didn't tell you to do that. And so there's, you know, a lot of people running these cringy triggering campaigns because they don't know any better. And I think it's cool that the rule books are addressing that and they're starting to be like, hey man, like this is supposed to be fun. Mm-hmm. So make your players comfortable. And I think especially in a book like this where there's all kinds of
stuff that would turn your stomach.
Yeah. It's important to be like, yeah, hey, this is all well and good and fun, but make sure your players think so too.
Right, because it's no fun if everyone's not having fun.
Yeah, it's no fun if it's no fun.
Mm-hmm.
So.
One of the domains that I kind of skimmed through that kind of hit on point for me is Borka. So Borka says here that it's the domain of desire and deceit. So I kind of got like that almost Game of Thrones-y sort of feel where, you know, the nobles and all the royalty and stuff are kind of scheming and plotting and pitching things against each other and using common folk as tools rather than actually, you know, trying to care for them and rule over them like a kingdom should. They were just literally tools to be used and discarded afterwards. Hallmarks of this place are basically political intrigue, things that surround around poison, like poisoning your victims, assassinations, revenge. It's very kind of like gothic horror sort of thing. It says here it's gothic horror, psychological horror. So yeah, I kind of got like a Game of Thrones sort of feel out of it. Everybody's vying for the political power in this place. That kind of thing is super cool because if you do it really, really well, you can pretty much get away with anything as long as it's within political game.
Yeah, and it's cool. What I really like about Borka, there's three big things that I like about Borka. One, each domain has a Dark Lord that's like the villain that domain is built around. Mm-hmm. Borka has two Dark Lords that share their Dark Lordship, and I really like both of them, but they're both really cool characters. Mm-hmm. The second thing that I like about it is nowhere in this entry, nowhere in this description, does it mention any kind of monster. So when you're playing a game like D&D that has these fantastical creatures in it, and somebody says horror, you immediately think, oh, scary monsters. Like that's how I make the game scary, is I put the scariest monsters in it. Mm-hmm. All the horror in Borka comes from the scariest monster that actually exists in real life, which is human beings. It's just people being horrible, and that's scary.
Yeah.
And then the third thing I like is that a lot of times, especially to people that don't watch or read a lot of horror, to people that aren't like horror fans, a lot of people's understanding of horror is that it is a really simple kind of thing. You know, monster chases lady, lady runs away. Borka almost necessitates a lot of complexity. It's really complicated. There's all this political scheming and duplicity of people that pretend to be your friend until they slip poison into your meal, and even the Dark Lord isn't simple because it's two Dark Lords that are sort of friends and they're cousins, so they're sort of supposed to help each other, but they also sort of hate each other, but they also sort of don't even know each other. They met like once or twice. So they're constantly vying for control, but not really. And like suddenly even this description has gotten complicated.
Yeah, no, there's nothing simple about Borka, which I think is really cool because it gives you a lot of freedom to do pretty much whatever you want as a DM and sort of as a player as well. Like, for example, say maybe one of the political parties approaches you with a job or something. You can't just go, okay, cool, how much gold is involved and, you know, what do you need done? You have to think about how it's going to affect your position with other political parties. You got to think about their other needs and wants that they're not telling you, like what's the motive behind actually doing this, and whether this is something that you want to do, and how is it going to bite you in the butt afterwards if it is going to bite you in the butt. Like there's no simple way to approach something, which I think is really cool because it keeps the players thinking and strategizing, keeps the brain going, and you know, you can kind of change it midway too, like, oh, all of a sudden the political party has a change of heart and they decided they're going to kill you now because that is going to better fit their needs than you actually getting the job done. Or they're going to throw you under the bus for completing the job. Just so many different things. So many different things that you can do with this.
Yeah, you can get really Machiavellian, Game of Thronesy. And that really lends itself, that complexity then really lends itself to the horror, because now you suddenly find yourself with this anxiety of like, everything I do is wrong. Right? There's no right answer. Everything I do, I have to figure out how it's wrong. But I can't do anything without messing something up and putting myself in danger and having someone be pissed off at me. And if you've ever been in a situation like that in real life, it's super nerve-wracking, and which is bad in real life.
Yeah.
But in a game where you're trying to scare yourself in a safe environment, that's really good to be just constantly on edge the whole time. You know, an old lady wants you to help her cross the street, and you've got to be like, should I? I mean, if I don't, then I'm a jerk, but if I do, then, you know, like maybe this is the grandma of one of the enemies of one of the houses I've been working with, and then if they see us together, they're gonna, the next thing I know, an assassin sneaking through my window in the night, and you're just paranoid all the time.
Yeah. So that's definitely why I like the whole psychological aspect of the game, because it's psychological horror, which is one of my favorite genres.
Yeah.
I like the kind that messes with your brain.
Yeah. Nobody scares you better than you. So if a story or a dungeon master can, instead of trying to scare you, just trick you into scaring yourself, instill this paranoia in you, and then let your brain do the rest, then that's the scaredest you'll be. I made up a word just now, scaredest.
Scaredest.
Yeah. I'm leaving it in though.
Speaking of the Dark Lords of this domain, there's a couple of pictures in this book too that show them. So this one is of Ivana Boritsi. I don't know how well the camera is going to be able to pick that up, but she's basically over here on this side. She's kind of like a poisoner, which useful in the political realm.
Yeah. And it's cool because she's worked with poisons so much that she looks all dead, and you can like see her veins through her skin and stuff.
She's got like a poison ivy feel.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's who she reminds me of a lot, is the like medieval poison ivy.
And then the other Dark Lord of this realm is Ivan de Lisnia, which he's in this weird contraption over here. He's basically described as almost childlike, like it's weird.
But he's an old man that
Yeah.
like pretends to be a child and like acts like a child, and he hides the fact that he's an old man. It's really creepy. I don't want to get too much into reading you the whole book, you know, but it's really creepy.
He kind of has almost serial killer-like tendencies and instincts, you know, harming of small animals, family members, manipulation, temper tantrums. But because he's a noble, you know, things like that get put under wraps and covered up pretty well so that his family isn't shamed or nothing comes back and bites him in the butt. But yeah, he looks extremely frail and almost non-threatening, aside from the weird contraption that he's in the picture, but he seems to have a very dark, twisted, devious mind as well.
And then the other, there's, like I said, there's 32 domains in this book, and we're obviously not going to get into all of them.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely no time for that.
Yeah, but we'll just do one more. And it's really hard for me to pick a favorite, but one that I just picked one that I think is easy to talk about and will be interesting to you, the viewer, and that's Falkovnia, it's called. And it's the domain besieged by the dead. And it's a zombie apocalypse setting, but it's D&D, so it's a medieval zombie apocalypse, which is honestly, it's something I've never seen before. Usually the zombie apocalypse stories, are like World War Z and Night of the Living Dead and all those, they take place today. Right. But this is, swords and sorcery and armor and knights, and the whole world is overrun by zombies. And it's all the hallmarks of your classic, Walking Dead, etc., zombie apocalypse stories. It's, let's see, it lists them here: dwindling resources, fickle hero worship, impending disaster, suspicion, totalitarianism, and of course, zombies. So there's most of the world, most of this domain is just an uninhabitable no man's land that's covered in zombies. And then there's a few little cities and settlements here and there that are holding out. And so then, that leaves you a lot of potential within those settlements to have stories that don't even have anything to do with the zombies. It's just, you can't leave the city because it's too dangerous. So all you have to survive is what's already in the city. So it's the drama and the fights over that. Mm-hmm. So if you like The Walking Dead and you wish that it took place in the Middle Ages, that's basically Falkovnia.
It sounds really cool too, because usually, besides the obvious fear of the undead in this kind of world, it seems like because there are so few actual living survivors left and the resources are limited and stuff, that in itself presents its own kind of horror. You, again, have to pick and choose who you can trust. You have to worry about people stabbing you in the back. You have a real fear of trying to actually save the NPCs and other characters that are presented with you from this world as well. And, as we all have seen all these zombie movies and whatnot, if you're that much outnumbered, the chances for their survival are pretty slim, which is stressful in itself.
Yeah, and one thing I really like, so I've always been into zombies, right? That's why our first ever live stream was Resident Evil.
Yes.
We love zombies. But in Dungeons & Dragons, zombies are kind of a chump enemy. Like, once you're like second or third level, you're like, zombie, who cares? You can kill them in one hit. So a zombie is not very scary. And in Falkovnia also, a zombie is not very scary, but you don't have to worry about a zombie. You have to worry about 100 zombies. And there's even special zombies in the back of the book, like plague spreader zombies that work more like, Resident Evil zombies, where if you get bit by them, you get sick. And then if you die while you're sick, you become a zombie. And so it's, and there's also this big giant monster that's just made out of zombies that are stuck together.
Yes, there's that. There's something called a boneless in here, which I saw.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just, zombies. You can even change them as well to, like, instead of just making the plague zombies infectious, make them all infectious. Give them faster movement speed, make them more aggressive, multiple attacks, make them try to grapple you more, have a horde mechanism built into place. Like, there's again, more freedom besides just a big, dumb, hulking zombie.
Yeah, and it's cool because it takes something that used to be really scary, that the nature of the game kind of made not scary anymore, and it makes it scary again.
Yeah. So if you guys also are familiar with Curse of Strahd has quite a few different little adventures, but more memorable is the Death House adventure. So this book also kind of has a little adventure built into it itself. It's called the House of Laments, which is another kind of haunted house sort of story-like thing, without revealing too much of what goes on in here.
So we didn't actually get around to reading this adventure because I might want to deploy it in my campaign, which Kaila plays in, so I don't, we don't want to spoil it in case we actually play it. But the main thing that we want to touch on is if you are thinking, hey, maybe I want to do a campaign in Ravenloft, but I don't know, like you don't have the confidence that you could write an adventure that takes place in Ravenloft, they got you, fam. They got you covered. I think it's for first level characters. So this is like your intro to Ravenloft. So even if you don't know how to write your first adventure in the setting, you can just use the one that they wrote for you. So, like we said, short version of this episode is that we really like this book. If you're a fan of horror, this book is great. It gives you a lot of tools to enhance the horror in your D&D game. Even if you don't want to have a campaign set in the Domains of Dread, you can just pick and choose pieces from other parts of the book. If you don't like horror, you probably won't like this book. It's really one note in that respect. It's all about horror.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. If you want something a little bit more bubbly and fun, maybe pick up one of the other many different sort of modules and adventures that they have to offer that, I don't know, probably revolve around fairies or something.
Yeah.
But horror is definitely my way to go.
But yeah, we're, you guys do whatever makes you happy. We are absolutely going to use this book in both of our D&D campaigns going forward. So we're really happy with this one. Mm-hmm. And we hope that you guys found our review of it interesting.
If there is something else that you guys are interested in us covering on this book as well, I would be more than happy to do another little session about this, going more into detail about certain parts or certain domains of this book as well. Like we just scratched the surface of this thing. It's a really basic review. So if you want us to go more into the character subclasses, or if you want us to go more into the actual domains themselves, or some more of the Dark Lords, or even the monsters, feel free to let us know what you guys would like to hear about it.
Yeah, and don't forget we have a Facebook group. So if you want to stay up to date on what we're going to be reviewing in the future, when we're going to be streaming, that kind of stuff, you can join the group. The URL's at the bottom of the screen. And also, you can send us a message on there, send us a Facebook message, and your question, maybe it's not big enough to do a whole episode about, but we'll just answer you directly. Mm-hmm. So if there's something you want to know about this or any other D&D book or anything gaming related, please ask us. We'd be happy to tell you. And yeah, if you want us to go in depth about any of the stuff in this book or any other, just let us know, and who knows, maybe you'll suggest the topic that ends up being our next episode.
Thank you so much for tuning in, you guys.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.